been a while since I've talked about anything Warhammer related, really. And I have been to a fair few tournaments. I went to a couple over the summer, which I just didn't really write anything down about. But I am kind of back, at least in the month of November. There was one I went to in October, but no great findings from that. They're all just RTTs right now because the GT season doesn't start again until January, which is kind of nice because basically a lot of people are using them to test lists and things like that, which I've been doing, which is cool. So basically, yeah, I am going to be doing a tournament report for the last one I went to, which was about a month ago now almost. It was like the very, very beginning of November. And I was trying out a new list that I'm really trying to workshop now. That I'm getting a bit more serious. Got a lot of games under my belt. I want to start playing a bit more competitively next year. Try harding a bit more. So yeah. So I built a list that was very similar to something I wanted to build at the very beginning of the edition when I first got back into it, and was kind of told that this is a terrible list, don't do this, and then I started playing with basically whatever I had that was battle ready, and then later, much more meta, what everyone else was playing for Chaos Space Marines. But then, the push I got was after seeing the London GT, the list that won that, was almost one-to-one identical to the list I'd wanted to build at the very beginning of the edition, and was slightly similar to stuff I've been running at the beginning of the edition too, but before the Chaos Codex came out. So, and the list I'm talking about, yeah, is the Emperor's Children list that won the London GT. So I brought something very similar, and I've got to say, I really love the list. It's super unique and interesting, and ultimately, yeah, it opens itself to a lot of what I think is very, very cool units that I really like that I don't use very often. So anyway, so what was the list? Well, we had Lucius the Eternal as the Warlord, because we're playing Emperor's Children technically, which is just, for those of you who don't know exactly how they work, it's just Chaos Space Marines, except Lucius has to be a Warlord, and everything has to be Slash, and you can run Noise Marines as battle line, which is the main reason I was playing Emperor's Children. Lucius himself I wasn't particularly sold on when I first made the list, but then I kind of see why he's so good after playing a few games with him. So, the list, yeah, Lucius the Eternal, who's the Warlord. Now, he's 95 points, so he has 5 more points than the Chaos Lord. But for 95 points, you get the same stat line as a Chaos Lord, except, like, for toughness, wounds, saving throws, etc., etc. Instead of the Plasma Pistol, he gets a Doom Siren, which is effectively a Strength 6 Heavy Flamer, which is very nice. And then, for melee weapons, instead of the Demon Hammer, he gets, it's 8 attacks, Strength 5, AP 2, 2 damage, and has Precision, which didn't ever come up, but is kind of nice to have, especially if you're going to something like Necrons or something, where you can optic Necrons, which I know lots of people aren't really favouring anymore, but stuff like that. He's very good at shredding cryptics, but so he was rocking with 5 Legionaries. He can't join Chosen, and even if he could, I'm not confident I would make him go with Chosen, but the only other units he can actually join is Noise Marines, which is kind of, you don't want a melee guy with the ranged units, so. And he has fights first, which is very nice. He also gives his unit fights first, which is an important distinction, because it means that if Lucius is just on his own, he still has fights first, unlike a lot of other leaders that lose their abilities when they're not leading a unit. But, so, and then when he dies, if whoever killed him has to make a leadership check, if they fail, they take D6 mortal wounds, if they succeed, they take D3, and then if that ability kills the unit, Lucius respawns. So he does quite a lot. Other HQs we had was Fabius Bile, which I was running Fabius a lot at the beginning of the edition, and people were kind of surprising people with him, because lots of people weren't really using him, and now I see he's in a lot of Chaos lists now, which is kind of funny, but, so yeah, Fabius is really good. He was with 10 Chosen, just a big 10-man brick of Chaos Chosen. And he gives his unit +1 toughness, +1 strength. Or, well, I guess he gives their weapons +1 strength now, but gives them +1 strength. He can blank a damage once per round, and the first time he dies, he gets up on a 2. He also has like 6 attacks at strength 5, AP1, 3 flat damage, so he's very good at killing Marines. So he's good at killing Terminators, he's good at killing 8-bound, kind of. Anything with toughness 5 and below and multiple wounds, he's very good at killing. He also gets some extra attacks here and there that aren't that great, but, you know, he's still pretty good. And he was using big brick of 10 Chaos Chosen, which is a really nasty mid-board skirmishing unit. They're not as tough as you think they are, but they kind of usually force your opponent to commit more than their, 335 points? So, more than 335 points to clearing them. And they are one of the few units in the CSM Codex that is kind of tough. Like, Chaos Space Marines are kind of a glass cannon army, which is fine. It's generally how I play most games, is glass cannons. But, to be honest, they're not as tough as you'd think they'd be, but they are fairly tough. I then had a Chaos Lord. They're just one of the best units in the Codex, and he was chilling with 5 Chosen, so we get the Advance and Charge. He had a relic, enhancement, which was called Mark of Legend, which gives you, once per round, you can reroll a hit roll, a wound roll, or a saving throw. Which is great for, saving throw, which is really good for fishing for the dev wounds with this hammer, because this is a detachment that doesn't get a reroll wounds stratagem, like Renegade Raiders or Packbound. So it means that for the Chaos Lords, they become a lot kind of worse, but especially if they've been led by if they're leading Chosen. But here he kind of gets around that. So in my battle line, aside from the unit of Legionaries that was with Lucius, I had another 5-man Legionary squad who really didn't do very much. I had 2 10-man Cultist squads, because you can't take Nurglings in Emperor's Children, so we had 2 Cultist squads just to screen and sticky objectives, and then 2 squads of Noise Marines. I really like Noise Marines. I've been using them for a while now. I think they're very good and kind of slept on, especially in this detachment. Even in, like in Renegades, for example, run rubrics over them, but in lots of other detachments, I was kind of liking the Noise Marines. But this attachment especially is great with the Oath of Moment. Suddenly their Blast Masters become a lot more accurate, which means they're much better at taking on not just infantry chaff, but they're still cheaper than Legionaries. And in this detachment, in this game faction, they're battle line, so they benefit from all the battle line specific stuff like raised banners, which in this tournament there unfortunately wasn't any, but we'll get back to that in a minute. As far as other units goes, we have the 10-man Chosen Brick with Fabius, the 5-man Chosen Squad with the Lord. We had a 5-man squad of Raptors with double melters, Plasma Pistol, Power Fist. They're kind of there. They get some plink damage here and there, but they're more there just to fly around and do secondaries. We then had 2 2-man Obliterator squads. Obliterators are another unit that I really love. I've liked them. They're one of the models that I really, really like for the CSM line. I don't like the new models. I have a lot of the old ones. Some are resin, others are plastic, but really, I much prefer the pre-9th edition Obliterator. Because when I started playing CSM in 8th, that was like the go-to unit. That was like insanely good. But anyway, 2 squads of them. They're really good in this attachment. They've come down in points now. They're actually a lot cheaper than a Vindicator now, which makes them a lot more viable. And they're barely more expensive than a Predator. Like, they can deep strike, their infantry can move the walls, they're fairly tough, they can indirect once a game, and with reroll hits they become a lot more resilient to a lot of the drawbacks of them just kind of whiffing really easily and being very overcosted. We had a Hellbrute, which was not great. He had a twin glass cannon, flamer fist, and then basically, for those of you who don't know what Hellbrute does, he basically gives an aura around him that is doubles your dark packs. So it's like if you dark pack for lethals, you get sustained as well, and vice versa. The idea was that the Obliterators deep strike in and castle around him, which I've learned since that the Hellbrute's not in this list anymore. We'll get to that in a minute, but the main problem with the Hellbrute is that it kind of was incentivizing my Obliterators to all castle, which you really don't want, because it kind of defeats the point of their deep strike and why they're so good. But anyway, we then have the Vindicator, the old faithful of the CSM right now, which I'm kind of falling out of favor with the Vindicator. The 24-inch range really sucks, and I find in lots of games they don't do a whole ton. They're kind of slow. Like in Renegades, they can advance and shoot, which makes them a lot more mobile. In Pac-Bound, you can be a bit more ballsy with them because you can loan up them. In this attachment, they don't do enough, I don't think. Especially for the points, they're nearly 200 points. I think I'd rather a Forge Fiend, actually, than a Vindicator, to be perfectly honest with you. Which I didn't take a Forge Fiend in this list, because they also have not... I've kind of over the Forge Fiend, but... Anyway, so we had 2 Chaos Rhinos, and... I think that's it. I think that's the list. So yeah, so this tournament, what was the lay of the land for this tournament? This tournament was extremely competitive because it was a Worlds practice tournament. So this was a very last minute local RTT because a lot of local guys were going to Worlds. Ottawa area, for those of you who don't know, has a lot of extremely good players around here, especially in the tournament, like the store that I normally go to for tournaments. And a fair amount of the guys were going off to Worlds, which happened last weekend. And so yeah. So this was put on last minute, basically as a practice event for those guys, and they were fine to have anybody show up, because I'm not a very good player, really. I'm getting much better now, I've started going to tournaments again, but, like, you know how it is. And so, yeah, it was a 3-round RTT that was Worlds practice, and it was on WTC terrain, which most people had never played on. Now, sorry, it was on GWTC terrains. And it was on GWTC terrain, which most people haven't played on. I hadn't. So, for example, there's no 3-story ruins. It's a lot more open. There's very distinct firing lanes. Shooting armies is just generally a lot better, which kind of shakes up the meta a bit. And there was pre-done missions and stuff like that. So, going in, most people were bringing their very best stuff, or were workshopping lists they'd been playing for a while, right? So it's like, yeah, it was going to be a tough tournament, to get into. So round 1, the matches. In round 1, I was paired into Da Orks, which is a great matchup actually for me. Not necessarily because it really favours me, but the Orks kind of want to do the same thing that Chaos wants to do, and it makes it. There's no tricks with CSM or Orks, really, right? It's just a lot of... let's just run at each other, then we're going to die, then we're going to run at each other, then we're going to die, then we get... Right, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of that. So what was in his list? He was running a Warhorde, which is apparently is the best Orc detachment these days. He had in his list Gazgul Thraka with 2 Meganobs. He had 3 War Bosses, each of which was rolling with... Sorry, 2 of which were rolling with 10 Knobs. The last one was with 20 Boys that also had a Pain Boy. Then there was... there was that big guy on the F1 car. He's like an Orc boss riding an F1 car. I can't remember what he's called. Death Killer Wartrike, I think, who was leading a group of the F1 cars. And then there was... I'm trying to remember now. 10 Gretchen. There was 2 squads of Flash Kits. I think there was 3 trucks, a battle wagon, Boss Snickrot, and... You know what? I think that's it. I think that was the Orc list. So a pretty standard Orc list. And so we were playing Linchpin, which is the one where you get more points if you hold your home objective. And I can't remember the twist on this one. Which is going to bother me. Anyway, well, they're not called twists anymore, but the scenario, whatever, I can't remember the naming. But and so I ended up going first, which you would think would be a good thing against Orcs, because normally Orcs want to go first so they can control their warg better. But I ended up going first, which we'll see didn't quite pan out the way I necessarily wanted it to, but we'll get there later without spoiling too much. So the deployment was... It's the one where it's like a step. And I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, it's the one where like it's almost like 2 jigsaw pieces. Anyway, so I deployed my army fairly aggressively. So I put one squad of obliterators into reserve, and that was it. Everybody else started on the board. I put 10 cultists on my home objective to sticky it. Now, screening here wasn't as big of an issue because the only deep strike he had... Well, sorry, like, backfield screening wasn't as that important because the only real threat that he had for deep strike was Boss Snickrot, and that's only a once per game uppy downy, so... And he's only one model, so not the end of the world. As far as frontline screening was much more important. So then, on what would be my left flank, or like the top of the board for me, I had 10 cultists, not quite on the line, but basically on the line. So if any Ork turn 1 charge was going to happen, because he could call the war on turn 1, keep in mind, that he would just be forced to charge cultists, and that would be kind of it. Behind the cultists was the 5 raptors. They were in position to jump onto the objective. And then behind a wall, behind all that, was a rhino that had 1 squad of noise marines and the lord with his chosen. They were basically put there as a countercharge unit, so because this was the side where the objective was closer to my line, so it meant that I could basically go there and then bait them into coming in close to the lord, who could then get out the rhino 9 inches, advance and charge, and just delete whatever came on there. Moving down the board, in the central ruins, because most of the GWTC maps have like 2 kind of fairly wide ruins in the middle for each person to hide behind, we had Fabius and his 10 chosen, ready to take the mid board. They were deployed in a way that the Orks couldn't actually fight them through the wall, but they also couldn't fit through the wall to fight them, so they were basically bulletproof. Hiding behind them was 1 unit of obliterators and the Hellbrute. Also behind that wall on the top side was the Vindicator, so it could move basically 6 inches and just see the middle of the board. Moving down even further, we had the other Rhino, which had Lucius and the other squad of Noise Marines in it. And then there was 5 Legionaries just on the line, because I didn't know what to do with them. The Orks deployed fairly similarly. Ghazghkull and his Meganobs were put up basically to mirror Fabius, and the rest of his armies was pretty much in trucks or battle wagons, ready just to move wherever they need to go. The only thing that was interesting was Snickrot infiltrated really like onto the objective close to me, which I see now why he did what he did, and I misplayed here badly. But anyway, so my turn 1, I went first, and now I can't remember all the secondaries and stuff. It's been a while now since since this tournament. But basically, I made one big mistake on turn 1, and I think that was it. This is a pretty good game for me, to be fair, for actual decision making. Basically, the Rhino drove forward and pooped Lucius out onto the one of the No Man's Land's objectives, but behind terrain. Lucius is great at this, because Lucius can basically just drive up to an objective, put himself out of line of sight, and drop the gauntlet down on it and say, come take it off me. But because he has fights first, it's kind of a mindfuck for your opponents, because they have to basically ensure that whatever unit they send at Lucius doesn't just die to him and his legionaries on the fights first, because keep in mind you're on an objective, so they're getting wounded rolls as well. So, especially against an army like Orks, this is really good. Now, obviously, this doesn't work against like Guard or Sisters, because they just indirect the shit out of Lucius and kill him. But against the Orks, this was great. My legionaries then sprinted to keep up with the Rhino, and they actually did sprint really far, and they kind of hunkered down there. Fabius and most of the fire support in the middle kind of stayed still. I think they moved a bit just to get better like turn 2 picks, but like they didn't extend themselves. The only problem that I ended up having here was, my cultists ran forward onto the objective, and my raptors jumped forward onto the objective. Now, there's 2 things I should have done here. Number 1 is I just shouldn't have charged Snickrot. If I didn't do that, the raptors wouldn't be mispositioned to turn 2, they would have probably survived, and I would be up another unit to help. Version 2, which I don't know why I didn't do this, for some reason I oath-momented Ghazghkull in turn 1, forgetting that I was going first. My idea was like, oh, it's great, if he comes out on his turn 2, I'll just overwatch him before rerolls. Yeah, of course he's not going to do that. I should have just, I forgot about Snickrot. I should have oath-momented Snickrot, because then the raptors would at least got oath on him. They couldn't see him to shoot him, but on the charge. And to be honest, 5 raptors should kill Snickrot with lethals and rerolls. Unfortunately, as it stood, the raptors jumped in to kill Snickrot. They half-killed Snickrot. Snickrot killed like 2 of them in return. And that's all that really happened on turn 1. Then, unfortunately, Snickrot uppy downy, because he could do that in combat. and the Raptors got shot to shit immediately afterwards. So, Orc turn 2 was pretty cagey. Snickrot teleported into my deployment zone to get a established locus. Yeah, he got full established, which unfortunately was bad for me. And if I'd oathed him, he wouldn't have been able to do that. My opponent would have to be forced to come to the middle with the battle wagon or something and do it, which would have changed the game a bit. And then as far as other stuff goes, my opponent, played it pretty cagey, really. He killed the Raptors, and that was about it, and then scored some points. He did, though, drive his battle wagon right into the middle of the board. Now, this was huge, because it was obvious he was going to declare his war on turn 2. And a lot of time when playing against Orcs, it's kind of like, can you survive the war turn? Because if you can, normally you win. The problem is he had boys with a boss in there, and those things are nasty on the war turn because they get extra movement, meaning that he could just get onto my objective if he wanted to from there. On the other hand, it's also like just a massive bait, because of course I can't leave that alone. But battle wagons are pretty tough, they're like land raider tough, pretty much, and it's like, and then I kind of need to combat non-effective the boys inside it as well. So it's, yeah, right, like it's an interesting conundrum. So I oath the moment the battle wagon, Fabius and his unit rush into the middle. The Obliterators all come around the wall or deep strike in next to the Hellbrute. The Vindicator pokes his snout out from behind his ruin. I take the objective. A bunch of Noise Marines get out to kill Snickrot. The Legionaries get back into the Rhino that Lucius had got out of, and that sort of drives into cover. And then we just unloaded everything into that battle wagon. We pop the battle wagon, all the boys have to get out, and then we just make it Operation Kill as many boys as possible, because we really needed them dead. So that's what we go to do. The Noise Marines kill Snickrot, he's at like 3 health, so and then basically Fabius and his unit is forced to charge the boys to try and kill them, which then allowed Ghazghkull to heroic intervention through the wall. Now, obviously it was a possibility that Ghazghkull could do this. Unfortunately, I got a little bit unlucky here because I kind of needed to either roll really, really high or really, really low, because if I rolled really, really high, all the Chosen could have shunted up the board, because keep in mind now you have to base to base, so they could have all run up the board to around the boys and base to base so that they were too far away from Ghazghkull. If they rolled too low, they wouldn't have actually moved far enough to get anybody into heroic engagement range with Ghazghkull. So basically anything in the 6 to like 8 to 9 inch range was what we didn't want to roll, which of course is statistically the most average to roll. And of course we rolled like a 7 or something like that, so unfortunately Ghazghkull came in. Not the end of the world. Fabius and his unit cleared out the boys, they killed the Pain Boy, they took the Orc boss down to like 2 wounds, and Ghazghkull killed a few of them. Fabius is fairly tough, because of the blank damage. Stops Ghazghkull from just auto-killing one Chosen, really. So, yeah, to make matters a little bit worse, a bunch of his other stuff came up to range. Yeah, so turn 2, he'd called the Warg too, sorry, I forgot to say it because he has to do that on my turn, but he did call the War. So I knew this was going to be a brutal one. So he just goes balls to the walls this turn. Ghazghkull actually falls back, which is interesting because he can't recharge again. He falls back so that the Gits and the War Trike can shoot Fabius' unit, and they basically wipe it. They bring it out to like 1 Chosen and Fabius, maybe. A group of knobs with a boss charge into my Vindicator and kill it. The injured war boss charges into one of the Obliterator squads. The War Trikes charge into Fabius. And then the second squad of knobs charges Lucius, who is chilling on the objective. So Lucius fights first, and him and his unit literally kill 8 out of 9 Orc knobs. Now he pops the fight on death stratagem, which for Orcs they don't have to roll, they just automatically do it, which is pretty good. But anyway, so the knobs then all fight back that died. They wipe Lucius's unit. Of course, Lucius's thing procs. The mortal wounds kill the last knob, which respawns Lucius, but unfortunately the boss then piled in, killed Lucius. Again, taking more mortal wounds. The Knobs pop the Vindicator, and Fabius's last chosen ended up dying, but he's stuck in combat now with the War Trikes. He turns around and kills, I think, 2 of them. And that is the bottom of turn 2. So we weathered the storm decently well, actually, because Lucius killed an entire squad of Knobs. The other squad of Knobs is just kind of in the open, fucking stuck with their cocks in their hands. Like, they're in a really, really bad spot. And a lot of my fire support's still alive. Sure, one of my obliterators is stuck in combat with a Orc boss, but, like, it's not the end of the world. As far as other stuff goes, yeah, so turn 3, we wipe a lot more of the Orcs. We kill my Noise Marines, and the Chosen managed to just shoot to death the Knob squad that killed the Vindicator. They get oath targeted. Unfortunately, he put his War Trike on top of the objective my cultists run and killed most of the cultists, so I know it was no longer... I think I might still be I think I was holding it maybe, but I'm not even confident about that. But I also had overwhelming force, and that was the only unit he had on an objective somehow. So, basically, the Lord then was forced to charge... I think it came down to like an Orc boss left for like the Knobs Orc boss, which the Noise Marines charged, and their champion managed to pop it, luckily, with his Power Fist. And then the Lord switched the oath target over to the what do you call it? Bloody hell, what's it called? The truck, that's what it's called. And killed that. Then, across the board, there was more shooting. We killed the Orc boss. That was the last Orc boss died. The Noise Marines killed the Orc boss. They killed Lucius. The last Orc boss died to the Obliterators and the Hellbrute in combat. Fabius was still alive, I think. I think he managed to kill another of the... I can't remember the exact turn orders for the Fabius combat, but basically what happened was Fabius killed all of the Trikes and then died to the boss on Trike. Gazgul was still alive, but he did lose a Mega Knob to shooting, sorry. And so going into Orcs turn 3, there wasn't really much left on the battlefield, to be honest. Basically, his Gits come into play, and they just shoot the shit out of a bunch of stuff. He then manages to charge my Lord with his... No, that hadn't happened yet. So he just shoots he kills most of the Chosen with shooting. Gazgul can fight again. Fabius dies, a bunch of stuff happens. Basically, at the end of turn 3, there's like nothing left on the board. There's like a unit of Legionaries, a unit of Noise Marines, a Chaos Lord, some cultists, some Obliterators, and I think the Hellbrute the Hellbrute never even got touched, actually, thinking about it, so... And so, yeah, to make a long story short, at the end of turn 4, I basically put everything into the boss on War Trike. I got down to 1 wound. I couldn't quite seal the deal, which was huge. Gazgul just kind of kept killing shit. I just kind of ignored him, really. Like, he popped a unit a turn, but I kind of had the units to spare at this point. The Gits were the biggest problem, because pretty much everything else was dead. So it got down to he killed... Yeah. We didn't do much on turn 4, unfortunately. So unfortunately then, the War Trike charged my Chaos Lord holding the objective, tank shocked him and killed him. Gazgul killed more shit. The Gits then basically got ready to just... Because he went second, he scores at the end, and the game was nail-bitingly close at this point. Like, we were I was ahead every turn up until the very last one. Unfortunately, because he scored at the end, he managed to max primary because I couldn't really do much about it anymore. And he ended up winning by a very small margin, but we'll get there in a second. So the Orc boss, Gazgul, destroys the last few things I had down in the south, basically. On my turn 5, I charge his Orc boss on War Trike with a Chaos Rhino and just tank shock him and kill him. My Hellbrute runs into the middle to do an action and gets it. My unit of Legionaries just sort of hunkers down and scores me primary on the last objective, and that was kind of it. The Orcs then, Gazgul kills the Legionaries, takes the objective. The Flash gets run into the center, takes the objective off the Hellbrute. They are then forced to get out, though. Oh no, that's a lie. So that's on turn 4 they went there. So then, because of the Hellbrut's Overwatch, he got his flash kits, one group of flash kits out in the hopes that he was going to send the Trike over to kill my Rhino, or just take the objective off the Rhino. Unfortunately, what ended up happening was he got out, the Hellbrute overwatched, killed a bunch of Gits, but not quite enough. But it was just enough that now the Trike had to stay where it was, or the truck had to stay where it was. And then, basically, the Gits got out. They managed to charge the Rhino, take the objective. He maxed primary, and he ended up winning by 4 points. Which is brutal. 4 points. It's just... If it was WTC, it would have been a tie. This was GW scoring, unfortunately, so... yeah, so it was a very close game. It was a brilliant game. It's one of my favourite games I've had in a while. And ultimately... What do I think went wrong here? Obviously, him going second was a huge bonus, because he managed to win because of it. But if I hadn't fucked up on turn 1 with the Rhino... not the Rhino at all, with the Raptor situation, if I hadn't gone in... I don't know that would have mattered. I think if I'd remembered to Oath Snickrot on turn 1, the Raptors would have killed him, and then my opponent would have only scored 2 points on Establish instead of, was it 4 or 5? Which still I don't think changed the game. So, it just makes it even closer. Overall, really, really well played. As far as what I learned from this list was, I learned how good Lucius is. And I learned just how good... a lot of these little units get when they get full hit rerolls in Chaos, but Lucius really was the shining star for this. So unfortunately, with one defeat, which should have been a tie, under my belt, we went on to round 2. Now, round 2 was into the Eldar. I haven't played against Eldar since before the summer, when they were... I don't know if they were better or worse back then. It was after the Fate Dice nerf, so they were kind of falling off by then, but even still. I was a bit unfamiliar with the army. And this wasn't my best showing for a number of reasons, as we'll get into later. So the mission for this one was, I think, just take and hold, and the twist was that there was 2 center objectives. And the deployment map was the one where you have like a table quarter with the cookie cutout from the center. Yeah, now the terrain on this one was really open. It was like annoyingly open. I couldn't even hide my entire army. Well, that's a lie. I could, but like he could just move to see it, and which was kind of a pain. I went second, and I deployed. I made some fuck ups in deployment. I got containment on turn 1, and I didn't think I was going to get containment because I believe I got containment on turn 1 last time, which is one of the best ones to get on turn 1. But just through sheer being a dumbass, I hadn't measured properly, and it turns out that my Raptors were just kind of fucking around, and they couldn't get containment, which forced some units to go out of their way to get it, and kind of set me up for some really bad positioning. I learned this list is really unforgiving to mistakes. There is basically no comebacks from anything. Everything is very fragile, everything dies, and you're not particularly mobile, so you have to really get the movement phase down to a T, or you're in trouble. So I deployed Fabius in the middle, as usual, behind the ruins. There was a unit of legionaries and a unit of raptors hiding under there as well. Both squads of obliterators went into reserve. One rhino was hidden behind a big piece of terrain that would run down the my side of the board. The other one was kind of put in the north to go contest the other objective. I had some cultists on my backfield. I had another squad of cultists screening the middle to basically stop him from being able to charge my troops as I ferried them behind the terrain. The Hellbrute was put in a position where I could deep strike the obliterators around him, and they could basically get anything. And then the Vindicator, which is kind of a problem, was kind of stuck out in the open a bit. The Eldar got first turn. Oh, sorry, the Eldar list. What were the Eldar running? So they had an Avatar of Cain. They had a Farseer. They had a couple of bullshit characters running around, mostly on their own. There was one that got back up when he died, and there was another one who did something else. And there was a Death Jester. As far as troops, he had some Warp Spiders, he had some Striking Scorpions, he had some Swooping Hawks, he had some of the Fire Phoenixes, or whatever they're called. And he had some Rangers, some Guardians. There was just a lot of stuff. It was just a lot of little things. And then he had 2 tanks, and that was pretty much it, actually. Oh, he had some Wraith Guard, or Wraith, the little Wraiths. Wraith Guard, I think they're called. With a Warlock. So anyway, on his turn, he just did nothing, basically. He played it super, super cagey. He basically hit everything behind terrain. He sort of overextended his Wraith Guard a little bit, which ironically didn't work out for me as well as it should have, maybe. Everything else was kind of either in reserves or just hiding. The only thing he did was he moved some of his tanks because of how open the terrain was. They could get a pot shot on my Vindicator, and they basically bracketed it. They didn't quite kill it, but they almost did. Now, Chaos turn 1. This is where I lost the game, and I made a bunch of mistakes, and yeah. So, the Vindicator just sort of drove behind the ruins, behind the Rhino, to get out of the way. I got really good secondaries on turn 1, but the problem was one of them was containment, which, as I said, is normally one of the best ones to get. The problem was, my Raptors were mispositioned, and no one else was in a great position to get it on the second board edge. The only people who could were the Noise Marines that were inside Lucius's Rhino, which had been positioned to go take the other objective. I fucked up. The Lord and his Chosen should have been in the top side Rhino. Lucius should have been in the bottom one, because the Lord and his Chosen is much more mobile. They are so much faster that being further away from the central conflict would be great for them. Lucius is very slow. Once he's gone out of his Rhino, he's just kind of, moving 6 inches, he can't advance and charge. So I messed that up badly as well. As far as anything else goes, the Noise Marines got out and did the containment. I scored a bunch of points in turn 1. I did very well in turn 1. And then we went into, basically, I make a bunch of fuck-up stage. So, because he'd put his Wraith Guard so far forward, I was like, oh, my Chosen can easily get out the Rhino and just kill them. So I oath targeted them, and then I got out and I charged them. Unfortunately, I did the same thing with Fabius, and I don't really know why I did this. I basically rolled an advance because my plan was I was going to push him in the middle, and I was going to sort of like hide him in a position where to basically bait in the tanks and the Avatar, because I was like, they're not going to kill that entire squad. But the idea was that, like, once they did, I'd be on 2 objectives. He'd be forced to come get me because it's taken hold, and basically I would then just counterattack with him. Unfortunately, I rolled a 6, and I was like, oh, this is amazing, I can get right into his deployment zone, and I did, and I charged the same unit of Wraith Guard that my original Chosen had charged, and then his Avatar, Heroic Intervention Beam, which is annoying, that costs 1 CP now. And so anyway, the basically killed the Wraith Guard, killed the leader with them, half killed the Avatar, and then everything went downhill from there. So, Eldar turn 2... Oh, Lucius went over to the top side objective. Eldar turn 2, they blew up Lucius's transport because it was kind of stuck out in the open. They killed my Chosen squad. They killed my basically killed. I think they actually did kill Fabius in the shooting phase. And this was a big problem for me. Now, on the other hand, I was kind of relying on my turn 2 to bring it back because all the Obliterators coming in with Dark Packs and everything. I was like, I'm going to pick up 2 of his little squads easy. I still have Legionaries, I still have Noise Marines, I still have all these little guys who should be, in theory, fantastic at killing Eldar. So, I was relying too on basically him shooting the shit out of the Chosen, leaving 1 or 2 of them alive, forcing the Avatar to come in to finish them off, and then Fabius getting back up afterwards. Unfortunately, he just lucked out, and he didn't really luck out because it's Eldar, so like, there's not a whole lot of luck for them involved because they have fate dice and things. I just kind of failed a few saves that were Armor of Contempted too, anyway. And basically, Fabius and his entire unit died of the shooting phase, and Fabius didn't even get up on the 2-up, so not that that really mattered too much. All that would happen is the Avatar would have had to have charged him and would kill him, unless I was extremely lucky. So, ultimately, annoying. I basically needed Fabius to survive the shooting phase, so the Avatar would have to charge him, Fabius would die, get back up, and then respawn to... Because Fabius could 1v5 the Aspect Warrior squad on his own, like, no problem. He's really nasty, like, for 85 points as well. He does a lot, but not enough, apparently. So, Chaos turn 2 was I was kind of like on the back foot now, because I'd lost Fabius' unit, I'd lost my other Chosen, even though they had managed to dip behind a wall when his Avatar fell back with the reactive move. They still just got charged and died. I think once again I kind of failed a lot of the invulnerable saves on the Lord. But that was fine. I basically drove most of my guys up. Basically every objective was mine on turn 2. I was still scoring really well, and so I marked his, I think it was his Phoenix Warriors. My Noise Marines killed them. The Obliterators came in and shot a bunch of stuff, and they just whiffed. They just whiffed completely. One of them rolled double ones for their attacks, and this is on the Strength 8 blast, like D6 shots with blast ones. So you're getting like 2 shots a pop because there's 5 Eldar in the squad, but like you're just like, oh no, and they just completely whiffed. My opponent then, I forgot that his Eldar guy, and to be honest, I'm not really sure it ever came up. One of his HQs can get back up after dying. I didn't know this, or I'd forgotten this, so my opponent didn't remind me. And the bring this up, it makes it sound salty, is because this is very relevant in a minute. Didn't remind me that this is what his guy could do. So there's no reason I would have charged a squad of Obliterators at this guy if I knew that he'd just get back up when I killed him. And so I did, thinking, oh, he's at like 1 health. I'll just charge these Obliterators at him. They're going to pop him in melee, right? And they did. And then he gets back up to full health, and it's like, oh, like, I feel like, as I said, I'm fine with this because I fucked up. But we're going to see in a minute why this guy, specifically, should have fucking reminded me of this. Anyway, and so, and generally, we just kind of really had a bad turn. Like, for killing things. Like, we killed, like, a squad of Aspect Warriors, and we just completely whiffed. We killed his Phoenix Lord dude, but he just got back up, and... Yeah, anyway, so, Eldar turn 3 happens, and he basically starts trying to deny me primary. I'm playing pretty cagey by this point. Not a lot happens on turn 3 particularly. He sends some Warp Spiders at me, he does a bunch of stuff. He mostly kills Lucius's units. I think Lucius was starting to come round the board to try and get back in the fight, but he was just so mispositioned. His Noise Marines were doing the same thing. Yeah, it was just altogether a really bad thing. Oh, another important one is my opponent had Swooping Hawks, but he'd forgotten to pick them up at the end of my turn. And he drew his mission, which one of them was behind, engagement of France. And I was like, oh, I forgot to do this. Now, me being... I just said, just do it, yeah, I don't care. And I did say, I'm like, you really shouldn't, I'm like, because you've seen your secondaries now, but... And he's like, well, there's no reason I would have left them here. Well, I call cap on this because you left them there for like 2 turns beforehand, so it's like, so obviously there is a reason you leave them there. I'm building up to something, okay? The reason I'm bringing up all these take-backs, no take-backs things, there is a reason. And I would like some opinions on this, because I have no idea. And so, so going in, he was ahead. I was losing most my models, but I was still doing pretty well in primary. I think I still had 3 or 4 of the 3 or 4 objectives. I was like maxing primary still at this point, I think. My legionaries that were behind a wall, they charged the Warp Spiders and just killed them. We did some more plink damage here and there. Like, I wasn't killing a whole lot here. I'd lost a lot of units, and a lot of my units were just kind of in bad spots, like because of the way I fucked up my turn 1. My idea with the legionaries was that I'm like, well, they're right behind a wall in the middle of everything, but the thing is, if the minute he moves anybody within 9 inches, they obviously just hop back behind the wall because of my, reaction move. And it's like, so if he wants to take this objective off them, they just hop behind the wall and are safe, or he just shoots them, right, and doesn't take the objective. So, then his turn comes along, and he's killing my shit, whatever, it's Eldar. And then he's lining up all these shots on these legionary squads, and I'm like, okay, so they're going to be dead, right? But then he drives forward one of his tanks, like, I don't know, they move pretty fast, the Eldar ones, to help on the objective. So, okay, I'm going to spend a CP, I'm going to reaction move back behind the wall. And he starts getting all flustered at this. And he said, can I take it back? And I said, well, I'm like, he's like, you didn't remind me about it. I'm like, well, the thing is, at the beginning of the game, I said that I could do this, so this is one of the stratagems to watch out for. I'd also already done this stratagem this game, back on turn 2. My Chaos Lord and his legionaries had done it when his avatar fell back next to them. They hopped back over the wall so they couldn't get shot and forced his Eldar to come over the wall to chase them. And I said, well, I was like, you knew I could do this. I've done this already. I've already spent the CP. And it's a tournament. Now, I understand that apparently now there's this really hippy-dippy attitude in the Warhammer community about take-backs in tournaments, which I disagree with gotchas. Everyone keeps using gotchas. This isn't a gotcha. If I didn't tell him I had a reactive move and then did it, that's a gotcha. But, like, I've been very upfront about it. Like, why should I help you not make mistakes in a competitive game. If this is a casual game, yeah, obviously I'd be like, don't want to do that because I'm just going to walk behind the wall. But in a competitive game, when there wasn't really prizes for this, I think it was like store credit or something, but and we're already in the consolation bracket anyway, but like, you know what I mean? It's just like, I'm coming here to try and be a better player. I'm coming here to learn how to do lists properly and all this kind of thing. Like, come on, man. Like, anyway, so he starts getting really annoyed about it and effectively saying, oh, I let any take-backs happen. I've been honest about all of my reactive moves, which I never forgot you could reactive move. I never once found myself in this situation because I remembered you could reactive move and play it accordingly. Also, that's a lie. He didn't. Every time he could have reactive move, he didn't bring it up. But also, like, I was thinking to myself, well, there's also the time with the Phoenix Lord dude. You didn't remind me he could get back up. That would have been nice to know when I went to charge him, right? If we're playing with, like, a, oh, don't make mistakes mentality. And the more I thought about this, the more annoyed I got. And we were already running low on time because Blood was playing like a fucking Alzheimer's patient, how slow he was playing. But anyway, I keep on, he has like 5 units. He's playing Eldar. So anyway, and so we kind of had a little bit of a discussion about this because I was like, well, I don't agree with this. And he said, I'd give a take back anything. I was like, I will give a take back on anything I would realistically ask for a take back on. This is not something I would, like, if this was me and I fucked up, I'd be like, oh, fuck, I forgot you could do that. Like, right? It's like, but at the same time, yeah, you told me you could do that and you've done it already. It's like, also, I don't think I would have made that mistake in this game, right? If I was him. But, and so, yeah, and he keeps saying, like, I can't remember. He kind of pissed me off because his insinuation was that I was being unreasonable. What did he say? Really bothered me. Got under my skin in case you couldn't tell. And oh, he's only complaining. Yeah, he's like, I set my entire turn up for this, blah, blah, and I was like, well, in my mind, I'm like, we'll just get good, right? Like, this is a competitive game. And then in the end, I ended up relenting, and I was a little bit pissy about it because I was just like, fine. I was like, just take it back. I was like, but come on, we got to hurry up. We're running out of time. And of course, because I'm scoring at the end of turn 5, so I need to get to turn 5 to maximize that advantage, right? Otherwise, it's a massive disadvantage. And so, and I must have been visibly irritated, to put it mildly. Not that I was, getting angry with him or being really rude or anything like that, right? Like, I didn't say, get good, scrub, or you're a bad player or whatever, but the insinuation was, I was like, I don't know if that was the correct answer. I was going to post about it on Reddit, and then I decided against it, but I was playing in my Crusade campaign a bit later, talking to one of my opponents, and he said that he would have been like, nah, fuck you, it's a tournament, get good. And I was like, nah, this guy was a Quebecer, so... But, anyway, and I was like, that's how it used to be, right? It's like, but this new one... So I don't know if I did the right thing or not. The thing that annoyed me wasn't the take-back, it was how rude he'd been about it. And the insinuation was that I was been salty and unreasonable and a bad sport for not letting him take back a big mistake. That would have massively changed the game. Because if those guys survived, I would have scored probably another 10 primary. Now, I wouldn't have won, but if we were playing with differential scoring, that was taking it to like a 12-8 or something like that, the game, right? As it stood, I let him do it. He killed them with the gunshots, blah, 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 blah. The rest is history. I ended up basically getting nearly tabled, and I lost. It wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't, like, I still scored fairly respectively, but it was like a 15-5 or, no, 14-6, sorry. I think it was a 14-6 playing WTC, which isn't great, but it could have been worse. And so, yeah, and that game kind of lived rent-free in my head for a bit. I don't know if I'm annoyed that I got salty about it. That's what I'm more annoyed about. I usually try not to get salty. There was just something about the situation that really rubbed me the wrong way. And we were very friendly afterwards and had a nice little conversation. Like, I don't want this to be like I'm ragging my opponent. Well, I am ragging him, but like, you know what I mean? But like, it just left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. And it wasn't that he was asking for a take back. It was that, yeah, his insinuation was that I was being a bad person for not letting him have a take back, and it's like, I'm not obligated to give you a take back. Like, it's a competitive game. Like, get good. But anyway. Well, he beat me, so he's clearly better than me. But, like, you get my point. Yeah, I mean, turn 1 is what I fucked up. I really overcommitted to those Wraith Guards. If I just kept Fabius back, it would have been a very different game. Because there's no way he would be able to shoot them. Which meant I would have controlled all mid-game pressure the whole game, because I score at the end of the turn, which means he has to come in, and Fabius would just wipe any Eldar Aspect Warrior on there, and score me a bunch of primary at the end, because there's 2 objectives in the middle, and Fabius' unit is 12 people, so he can just spread himself out over it. Anyway, I messed up, and we're not going to make that mistake again. Well, maybe we will. We'll find out on Saturday. So anyway, basically, well, according to this tournament, 0-2, but in WTC 1-1, well, 0-1-1, I went into round 3, and there's not much to report on round 3, because round 3 was just a complete one-sided game. I played into this lovely gent who was playing Tau, and Tau, I have a very good win rate against this edition for some reason, which makes a sharp contrast when I was last playing Warhammer competitively, which was an 8th edition, when I had I think a 0% win rate against Tau. And so, anyway, to make matters, there's not a whole lot to say here. He conceded at the end of round 3. We didn't even score it out properly, which kind of hurt my tournament standings, but whatever. I went 1-1 and 1-2, or 1-1 and 1. It probably would have been a 20-0 had we played it out. We didn't, but at the end of round 3, the Tower pretty much tabled. What did he have in his list? I guess that's a good question. So he had some big Tau suit thing, not a Storm Surge, something else, slightly smaller version. He had like 2 Devilfish, he had 2 gunships, he had 2 stealth suit squads, he had 2 breacher teams, he had 2 squads of fire suits, like the big Gundam things. This and that. I can't remember everything he had. I'm not amazingly familiar with the Tau unit range. So, and the last mission was... You know what? I can't even remember what the mission was. It didn't really matter. I think it was kill 1, kill more. Hold 1, hold more. I think that was... Oh, was that mission 2, actually? That might be taken hold. I can't remember. Anyway, this is a few weeks ago now. So, to make, long story short, basically in a 10-3, I'd killed both his squads of suits, stealth suits, both his big Gundam suit squads. I killed 2 of his breacher teams, a gunship, a Devilfish, another Devilfish at 1 wound. It was just a bloodbath. Like, he was not new to Warhammer, but he's very new to competitive Warhammer. And so it was kind of like, you know, a bit of a learning curve for him, I guess. As far as major things go, he didn't play nearly cagey enough. Because I went first, he really should have been forcing me to be more aggressive, to bait me into, overextending. As it happened, he actually overextended into me for some reason. And it was just like, on turn 1, a bunch of my he infiltrated a bunch of stealth suits. So my Rhino drove up, a squad of Noise Marines got out, killed them by shooting. Then I was like, I'm trading Noise Marines for these stealth suits, which I think is good for me. Right? Yeah, as I say, which I think is good for me, right? Having said that, he ended up then moving really close to them. I said, don't move within 9. I was like, because I'll just pop them back in the Rhino with the stratagem. He's like, nah. Did it. I'm like, okay. So the Noise Marines just got back in the Rhino. And then, I don't know, there's just a bunch of stuff like that. But really what it came down to was he just forgot Fabius and his unit was there. Because Fabius, I didn't make the same mistake as game 1. Fabius and his unit stayed behind, like basically pinning down the middle, but like for a while. And what he needed to do was just put some stuff on those objectives, because I'm forced to score them. So Fabius is eventually going to have to get out and kill some chaff and then get shot to shit. Unfortunately, he just put like half his army in the middle of the board to shoot my right flank, and then Fabius and his unit just came in and mopped up. And it was like... And I said to him at the end of the game, he was asking me, he's like, what did I do wrong? And I was like, I'm not really the best person to ask. I'm not the best, like, I'm not that good of a player. And then in the end, I was like, did you just forget Fabius was there? And he said, yeah. And I was like, okay. So that makes sense. So anyway, we did get our win in the end. Not a lot to report in the last game. But at the end of 10-3, the Tau had, like a quarter of their army left. And we hadn't lost that much. We'd lost some Chosen and we'd lost some Noise Marines, basically, and that was really it. So yeah, that was that tournament. Now, I do have another tournament this weekend, which is another RTT. It will be WTC though, instead of GWTC, which is nice. We'll see how we get on. As far as findings from this list, I really like this list a lot. I think it's a super fun, kind of unique list. It plays differently to a lot of the generic CSM lists, and it uses a lot of units that I really like Noise Marines, Obliterators, stuff like that. The only thing I really wish I could have is a Demon Prince with, because I love those models, but oh well. They're just so bad this edition. At the end of it all, Lucius really came through in the game against the Orks. I learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes. As far as other stuff goes, it's kind of like I realized what units were kind of completely redundant or just completely pointless in this list. It just didn't do anything, and so the obvious ones. The second squad of cultists didn't really accomplish much. In my game against the Tau, they scored a bunch of secondaries, but literally any unit could have done that. So yeah, they don't really do much. You're also a lot of the time wasting insane bravery on that second squad of cultists just to ensure that they can keep scoring them when 5 legionaries are significantly less likely to fail. As far as, like, the Raptors did basically nothing. The Fireman Legionary squad on their own kind of did nothing, but if you're taking the cultists out, then they go out. The Hellbrute is out the list now, which is a shame because I love Hellbrutes. They're still on my Crusade list, which is somewhat similar to this build, but a lot more casual, a lot more flavorful. But like, the Hellbrute's not inherently bad. It's just it incentivizes a type of gameplay that I think hurts the list, and it's incentivizes everybody casting within 6 inches of the Hellbrute. When I'm having obliterators teleporting in everywhere, noise marines spread out across the board and stuff like that, I don't want to be force consolidating next to a Hellbrute. It's the same way I don't like a Baden, right? Like, where I'm like, everybody wants to be consolidating around a Baden. It just makes you really predictable to your opponent. But at the same time, if he's not babysitting 2 units of obliterators, he's kind of a waste of points. So he's out. And then ultimately, in my current version of the list, the Vindicator's gone. Vindicators, everybody swears by them. I never do anything with Vindicators in any game I play. They're just never that good. I understand I don't play Renegades very often, where they're much better, or even Pack-Bound, where they're much better, but like... And I only own 1 Vindicator, so a lot of the time I think people want 2, because you can be a lot more ballsy with them that way. But as it stands, like, a lot of the time, I'm like, if I ever extend, then they just kind of die, and they only have 24-inch range, which means they're just kind of there, and they don't do much, I ever find. I never really find myself saying, oh, I'm glad I have that Vindicator, right? So, we're trying them out. Maybe I'll be like, no, come back. But, like, in the game against the Eldar, did nothing. In the game against the Orks, the best thing it did for me was bait the knobs in. The game against the Tau, it killed... Actually, it did decent. It did pretty good in the game against the Tau, to be fair. But anyway, so as far as the list changing up now, I've gained another Chaos Lord with the Warmaster's Gift, who will now be babysitting the 5 legionaries that didn't have a leader before. I have another Rhino to ferry people around. I now have a squad of Nemesis Claw, which I'm quite excited to try out. I don't know how good they'll do, but especially against stuff like Aquilons, Orc Knobs, a lot of these like annoying units, they're kind of good. And then we have another squad of Obliterators, because I'm finding them very good this edition. Well, now that they've got the points drops in this attachment, I find them great. So anyway, that was my tournament report, and aside from a slightly wonky second game, where both my opponent and myself got a little bit salty at each other, overall great tournament, and I very much look forward to the one on Saturday. We're going to see how this goes. As far as good and bad matchups go, for me, I think Orks is a good matchup. I think World Eaters is a good matchup. I think that Dark Eldar is a decent matchup. I think bad matchups for me is Necrons. I think that Eldar is a kind of bad matchup. I think Sisters is a bad matchup. I think Guard is a bad matchup. So a lot of bad matchups. Basically anything with good indirect fire is really bad for me. And then, which is Sisters and Guard. And then Necrons are just annoyingly tough. And I don't trade very well with anything in the Necron army. And ultimately, yeah. So we'll see what happens.